Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today, March 22nd of 2022. And we want to take a moment to speak with you about the breaking news, the news that's on all media and social media. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Judge Jackson, who's been in the news since the end of January of 2022 and has been a subject of some controversy on our channel, as well as many others, will be discussed today because there are certain significant issues, certain big questions that are being raised, and I don't think they were the ones that you're going to see on the nightly news or many other podcasts as well. But before we get to those questions and objections that we hold, we first want to mention that if this is the first time you are seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we go out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow, which at the moment may or may not include YouTube, that we reach out to hear your voice. We reach out to speak to you because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to free speech. No matter where in the world you may be, no matter what your government may think, we want to hear your voice about the issues that are affecting us all. And we hope that this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will be able to join us to share your voice on these issues. First, we want to look at what's going on. We know that back in January 27th of 2022 to be exact, we had some things to say about her nomination. Actually, at the time, about her potential nomination and those who are being considered alongside her. In fact, at the time, what we had to say was this. CNN is as biased as it comes. But even they recognize that the individuals that will be on the list, well, they have all of 1, 2, 3. That's it. Those are the picks. 3 choices. And after those 3 choices, they have another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in total, at best, only 8 women can be picked according to CNN. And even some of those, well, kind of like Anita Earls, a 61-year-old North Carolina Supreme Court Associate Justice whose age would likely hamper serious consideration from Democrats looking to seat a younger nominee in the court. She's just too old. At 61, she's just 6 years too old. How about the rest of these women? Regardless of the qualifications, it has nothing to do with whether or not they're good. And this came out January 26th, yesterday. Democrats don't care if you're good. Do you check the box? Check the box black. Check the box woman. Check the box age. You get the job. Not are you qualified? Are you good enough? Are you the right person? This is absolutely structurally changing the structure of the Supreme Court, and it's all about politics. It's all about getting votes. Now, you may or may not agree with that assessment that we made on January 27th. There are people on both sides of that, but there are many issues that were brought up. And one of the most primary is that each of the women that were being considered, and eventually Judge Jackson in the nomination, had nothing to do with their qualifications. It had to do with inherent facts about them, that they were born black, that they were born women, that they are politically of the right ideology. That's it. And in particular, Judge Jackson was picked because she is an activist judge. She is an individual who believes that it is okay to use the judicial system to enact legislation and to change America without the consent of the people, without any votes, without Congress. That is a troubling thought. Now, we want to be sure, as much as people have been talking about this, we're hearing so many people who are saying, well, she must be the next Supreme Court justice. And that reasoning is just as vague as the reasoning why she was selected. And we'll show you what we mean. This was from our commentary on March 1st. Now, you may think that Judge Jackson is highly qualified. And more importantly, that isn't what she's being sold on. These birthright attributes are being promoted as her main focus, which detracts from anything that she has achieved in her life to date. It's kind of sad. And we see that this is being reflected in national polling at this time. In looking at a Morning Consult poll, we see that the key question that's being asked, Judge Jackson has been nominated to replace Justice Breyer on the Supreme Court. How much have you seen, read, or heard about her? And out of 2004 registered voters, what we see is that 40% of the people have no idea who she is. In fact, looking at Politico and speaking about the poll that was just done, we see that 46% of voters say they want to see Jackson confirmed. 46% of voters that they spoke to want to see her confirmed, but the overwhelming majority of voters, 28%, have never heard of her and don't have an opinion of her. So people are picking just Judge Jackson because of the color of her skin, because of her gender, because of the equity. And that's it. We don't believe that anyone should be picked for the Supreme Court based on the color of their skin, because of the gender that they have, or their political ideology. That actually subverts the actual purpose of the Supreme Court, and it does not provide America with the best person, regardless of any attribute that they are born with, because none of those things matter. It's their only qualification should be their intelligence and their ability to do the job best. It's not just the public that are making this choice based off of a series of checkboxes. I'll give you another example. This is my local councilwoman, Councilwoman Angela Riley. Now, Councilwoman Angela Riley had this to say on February 26th. Black women have been achieving greatness as lawyers and judges since 1872. It is time for us on the SCOTUS. I support Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination and urge the Senate to quickly confirm her. Now, here's the part that really sets this apart. Hashtag she will rise, which has nothing to do with any qualification of Judge Jackson. Hashtag she looks like me, which has nothing to do with her qualifications. Hashtag representation matters, which has nothing to do with her qualifications. Hashtag exceed expectations, which has nothing to do with qualifications. This is an elected individual. This is an individual who is a PhD of pharmacy and has written papers, including this paper, Moving from Injustice to Equality, a time for the pharmacy profession to take action. She's an activist. In fact, as the introduction states, as the United States population continues to grow and minority populations grow at a faster rate, racial inequality, social injustice, and structural racism have become more apparent, and racism has been declared a public health crisis, which is insane in and of itself. Therefore, it is paramount that student pharmacists understand the influences of racism on health and wellness outcomes and health care delivery so that they may address the unequal distribution of social determinants of health that are the key drivers of health disparities among racial and ethnic minority populations, and engage in efforts to dismantle systemic racism and facilitate systemic changes. That's what an elected official, Angela Riley, a progressive and Democrat, that's where she stands. Because Judge Jackson fills the check boxes. She's got the right political ideology. She supports social justice. She supports things like critical race theory. She supports many of the radical ideas that are not held by the general public. And in fact, these are ideas that are not being shared with the public. Again, if we look at her tweet on February 26th in speaking to her constituents and people on Twitter in general, she's saying she will rise. I ask you this: what does a gender have to do with your freedom to speak? She looks like me. What does the color of anyone's skin have to do with your ability to defend yourself with a firearm in your home or other places? Representation matters. Why does it matter? Exceed expectations. Well, we would hope that everyone on the Supreme Court would exceed expectations, but what expectation is being stated? What do you expect her to do? To support social justice, to support critical race theory, to support some of the most radical ideas being facing America at this time. That is a scary thought when we see that the very same people, the same elected officials, are trying to teach children and teach our next generation these same hyper-racial ideas that will change the face and direction of the United States forever. It's not just elected officials like Angela Riley at the local level. No, it's far worse because it's what's being told to the public. Looking at the news media, this is from Spectrum News. Susan Arbiter works for Spectrum News, and she had this to say today, March 22nd. She says this is just flat out racist because the image, you see the KBJ initials of Judge Jackson in that meme, we see that that's crossed out and CRT replaces it. We had to ask a simple question. Why and how exactly is it racist to highlight political preferences of a nominee, especially when that political bias may and likely will affect legislation in the near future? Your feeling of dislike is not de facto proof of racism. Rather, it seems to be an attempt to silence opposition. We went on to say, it is massively troubling when major news media representatives push emotional agendas, giving that agenda credibility it does not deserve. This is objectively not the purpose of news. It makes suspect the media organizations and its coverage, something that we have seen all too often, as a recent hint, the New York Times and a certain laptop. If no one else will call it out for fear of pejoratives being hurled at them, I will, since I don't care about the pejoratives nor those hurling them. We said that on Minds and on other social media, and we invite you to look at that and to see the tweet itself. But the fact is that we are being misled. We are being told, both by emotion and by checkbox, that Judge Jackson must be approved. But where is the substance? Where are the reasons why she should be approved? One of the issues she was addressing today in the Senate hearings was about critical race theory and her position on critical race theory. And we think this is very important because this goes to a message that we have heard from members of the Democratic Party across this nation, not just in New York State, not just in the Senate, but even down in Texas. And we take this example from our article on March 14th, which you can see on Rumble as well as YouTube and other social media. There was this comment from Beto O'Rourke.
As kids go to war to protect our supply line. So we agree there. I want to make sure that we increase production in Texas. I want the jobs to be here as well. And I think you and I probably are both on the same page as well. We don't see CRT being taught in our schools right now. It's a course that is taught in law school. No, I don't think it should be taught in our schools. Yeah.
So let me stop right there. Did you hear what he just said? oh, it's a course that's taught in law schools. See, he's deflecting. And now, of course, he did say, no, he doesn't think that critical race theory should be taught in our schools, presumably to our kids in public school, in elementary and junior high school, and maybe even high school. That's the assumption I'm taking from what he said. But he also said, well, it doesn't exist, though. And we hear this often from many Democrats. Well, critical race theory shouldn't be taught to kids that are in elementary school, in junior high school, in high schools across America. And that isn't part of what they're being taught. That isn't part of the school boards, which are being monitored by the FBI and Attorney General Merrick Garland to make sure that parents don't get out of line, that they don't interrupt the education system as determined by Democrats across this nation. But when you actually listen to what Judge Jackson had to say and understand that she is a member of a board, of a school board that is dedicated towards social justice, something that she has admitted to, and that is a known fact. And when the question of social justice is brought up and that school curriculum, well, this is what we saw in the conversation between Senator Ted Cruz and Judge Jackson.
All of us will agree that no one should be discriminated against because of race. When you just testified a minute ago that you didn't know if critical race theory was taught in K through 12, I will confess I find that statement a little hard to reconcile with the public record, because if you look at the Georgetown Day School's curriculum, it is filled and overflowing with critical race theory. That among the books that are either assigned or recommended, they include Critical Race Theory, an introduction. They include The End of Policing, an advocacy for abolishing police. They include How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. They include literally stacks and stacks of books, and I'll tell you two of the ones that were most stunning. They include a book called Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram Kendi. And there are portions of this book that I find really quite remarkable. One portion of the book says babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There is no neutrality. Another portion of the book, they recommend to babies confess when being racist. Now, this is a book that is taught at Georgetown Day School to students in pre-K through second grade, so 4 through 7 years old. Do you agree with this book that is being taught with kids that babies are racist?
Senator, I do not believe that any child should be made to feel as though they are racist, or though they are not valued, or though they are less than, that they are victims, that they are oppressors. I don't believe in any of that. But what I will say is that when you asked me whether or not this was taught in schools, critical race theory, my understanding is that critical race theory as an academic theory is taught in law schools, and to the extent that you were asking the question, I understood you to be addressing public schools. Georgetown Day School, just like the religious school that Justice Barrett was on the board of, is a private school.
Okay, so you agree critical race theory is taught at Georgetown Day School?
I don't know, because the board is not, does not control the curriculum. The board does not focus on that. That's not what we do as board members, so I'm actually not sure.
We have Justice Jackson, who is a member of the school board but doesn't know what the school is doing, although her purpose as a member of the school board is to help direct to guide the direction of education at that private school. But yet she doesn't know about critical race theory, nor did she object to critical race theory itself. But this also flies in the face of what we were told by none other than Beto O'Rourke, as we've heard from many, many politicians throughout many years now. That critical race theory, it doesn't exist in our schools. And yet, we've just seen that it does exist in our schools. That there, even in private schools, that it does exist in the material that is being assigned to our children that they are supposed to be reading and learning from. So it is part of the curriculum. It may not be named as critical race theory, but its application does exist. And Judge Jackson is okay with that. She's okay with critical race theory, with social justice as being part of what is taught in America and as a policy overall. Here is a conversation. Now, it's a clip as well, and this was mentioned by Jack Posobiec. I want you to see in this clip the reasoning why Judge Jackson decided that in the case of pedophiles, convicted pedophiles, that she decided to give lighter sentences than any recommendation that was made either by prosecutors and or as stated in the law. And I want you to hear her reasoning here because I think it's critical.
As you said, the guideline was based originally on a statutory scheme and on directives, specific directives by Congress at a time in which more serious child pornography offenders were identified based on the volume, based on the number of photographs that they received in the mail. And that made total sense before, when we didn't have the internet, when we didn't have distribution. But the way that the guideline is now structured, based on that set of circumstances, is leading to extreme disparities in the system because it's so easy for people to get volumes of this kind of material now by computers. So it's not doing the work of differentiating who is a more serious offender in the way that it used to. So the commission has taken that into account, and perhaps even more importantly, courts are adjusting their sentences in order to account for the changed circumstances. But it says nothing about the court's view of the seriousness of this offense.
But yet it would seem it does a lot. It says a lot about the seriousness that Judge Jackson found about these offenses. So what we said here is, so the reason for the lighter sentences is that it's easier to commit the crime. Name any other crime that is punished in the same manner. Not that any should be, but if confirmed and joined by similar activists, SCOTUS, Supreme Court justices, in time this could be the norm to the detriment of the nation. And I want to be very clear about that. Imagine this. Imagine that if you commit one murder, you'll be convicted to, say, 20 years. But if you commit 5 murders, well, then you're going to get a lower sentence, maybe 5 years. Would anyone be okay with that idea? Let's say that you committed a robbery. You mugged women. And so you mugged one woman and you got let's say the time in jail was 1 year. But if you were to commit 50 robberies, mugging 50 women, that you would get a grand total of 6 months. Would that be appropriate? Does that make sense? Put into context of child pornography. So it used to be that if you received in the mail, let's say 50 pieces of child pornography, you would get a sentence. And because today you can get 5,000 pieces of that same or similar child pornography, you should get less of a criminal penalty than what you would get because you had 50 pieces of that criminal property sent to you. It's the same root problem. It's the same root crime. In fact, it's the same crime, just at a higher magnitude. And because the magnitude has increased, because the ease of committing the crime has increased, Judge Jackson has said the penalty should be less. Can you imagine what that means for so many different criminal cases? Can you imagine the impact that that kind of judicial philosophy has for the rest of the nation? This troubles us. And we would love to go back in time and ask the people who were in the polls that were taken by Politico and around the nation, and ask people, if you knew that having more crime would result in less punishment, would you agree to that? Do you think that that's someone who should be a Supreme Court justice? If we were looking at back when CNN first was looking at its analysis back in January, and if people were asked not about the age of the justice, not the color of their skin, not their gender, but were asked, do you believe that these individuals should be picked because they believe that if you commit more crime, you should get less of a penalty? Would there have been an outrage at the time? Would any of them have been picked based on that criteria? Because we should ask that question. And we should ask individuals like Councilwoman Angela Riley. You're saying she looks like you. Well, do you, Councilwoman Angela Riley, and so many other Democrat politicians across America, do you agree that the more crime someone does, the less their penalty should be? Is that exceeding expectations? Is that what representation means to you? Because that's what you've said so far to your constituents. But now that we're actually looking at substance, not color of skin, not gender, not sexual preference, but when we're looking at the substance of being a judge, and we are asking specific questions, as we have in the past, and as the public is now being able to see and hear, we have to ask a question. Is this in the best interest of America? And we have to ask the question, will we allow these politicians to continue to lie to us like Beto O'Rourke, telling us that a problem that many parents are concerned about does not exist, and yet we know it does exist, and it is supported by Judge Jackson? How long are we going to allow members of the press to blatantly and arbitrarily tell us their feelings and give the full weight and power of these major national news media outlets to try and give credibility to their feelings while ignoring the substance of the situation at hand? I don't think a lot of people are going to be looking at this. There's going to be a lot of conversation about Judge Jackson. And we'll be very clear. We are not saying that she is not a qualified judge. Yes, she's very accomplished in her life. But that has nothing to do with, is she qualified to be a Supreme Court justice? What does that mean for America going forward? Because the Supreme Court will not always be 6 conservatives versus 3 liberals, or quite honestly, 3 progressives. There will at some point be a majority of liberals, just as it has been in the past. But what does it mean to America when that change occurs? How will that affect our children and their children? Do you really want to see pedophiles, convicted pedophiles, to be able to have easier access and lighter sentences for committing a crime? Is that going to prevent anyone from taking on that crime and those criminal actions? And isn't that something that we want to deter? If we're looking at an individual, a justice, that is saying that they are willing to teach children how to be racist, shouldn't we be suspect in how they are going to look at the law in America and how they're going to bias and color their decisions? For all of these reasons that we have raised in January, the questions we have raised at the beginning of March, for the questions we are raising now as we are listening to the answers from Judge Jackson, we again say we do not support Judge Jackson becoming a member of the Supreme Court. And that has nothing to do with the color of her skin. It has nothing to do with her gender. It has nothing to do with her sexual preference, nor does it have anything to do with her age. All the reasons that were picked by the Biden-Harris administration, reasons to get Democrats to come out and vote in the 2022 midterm election, political ideology and political reasoning. No, we oppose her because of her substance, her substantive position on critical race theory, her substantive position on pedophiles and punishment of pedophiles, on her substantive position on being an activist judge. Maybe you think we've misunderstood. We want to hear what you have to say. And we hope that you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we speak on our live stream with you, hoping that the internet overlords will allow us to do so. We thank you, and we look forward to seeing you soon.